2005. The year Batman Begins, Zathura, and Revenge of the Sith dropped into theaters. The year YouTube invited everyone on the internet to broadcast themselves. The year that Family Guy Live in Vegas dropped and changed the landscape of music forever.
I guess it's good I never told you I'm into P.
And I guess the year the PSP came out. The PSP, short for the PlayStation Portable, is Sony's first ever serious handheld console, originally released in December of 2004 in Japan, but in America we got it a few months later in March of 2005, which is where this model in particular came from. This PSP is indeed a launch model, still working to this very day. For the most part. Unfortunately, some of the buttons and stuff do not work on this thing anymore, so if I ever show any gameplay footage off in this video, I'll be using another model PSP. As for everything else though, it's gonna be my childhood PSP. And now, please disregard the ugly aftermarket chrome faceplate. I was a middle schooler with no taste and unrestricted internet access. But yes, this was a launch PSP, pre-ordered at the only place that we could get one. A Blockbuster in a different city. And when my mom brought it home after work, I was over the moon. The PSP was positioned to be the ultimate handheld console experience, giving you games meant for the couch right in the palm of your hands. The tech packed into the console made it stand somewhere in between a PlayStation 1 and a PlayStation 2, which, while not impressive at first blush, makes it quite the juggernaut when compared to its competition, the Nintendo DS. Developers were able to get this thing running games like Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, Tony Hawk's Underground 2 Remix, and so many other games that, when positioned next to their console counterparts, stand just as tall and sometimes even taller. Thug 2 Remix in particular included more features than the console versions, like new levels, skaters, and much more. PSP ports that add more content were surprisingly common back then, but that's a topic that I don't intend to harp on. Maybe another video. The games made it a killer portable console, but it had much more than that to offer. The PSP was about media as a whole. Physical game copies were released on a proprietary disc format called UMD, standing for Universal Media Disc. These were basically mini DVDs with a protective exterior containing up to 1.8 gigabytes of raw entertainment. Besides games, Sony also managed to get movie studios to publish their films on this format too, which you could tell if it was a UMD movie disc by the icon at the bottom right of the disc. Games have a controller, and movies got a film strip. And when you got Spider-Man 2 on both, can be a real lifesaver. Films like Resident Evil, Superbad, Dawn of the Dead, and so many others were published on UMD. It's insane how much was put onto this format. It almost felt like Sony was positioning this as their next big media format, like Blu-ray or Betamax. And while the movie experience on a PSP was certainly nowhere close to watching on a normal TV, the fact that you can conveniently and officially watch movies on the go felt special. It's commonplace now, but this was back in 2005, mind you. My flip phone at the time could barely run Galaga. And yes, before you ask, there were also UMD music discs with albums from bands like Metallica, Limp Bizkit, and Nirvana being released on the format. I don't own any of them, but I do remember seeing them in stores like Best Buy, where they had their own section in the music aisle just for them. Same for movies too. And for some reason, I always thought that was kind of odd, like, why not just put them with the PSP games? It's not like anything else played UMDs back then. I know Sony had plans to make a UMD player that never really got off the ground, so I guess I answered my own question, huh? If you didn't want to deal with buying UMD music or movie discs, but still wanted to take advantage of the PSP's multimedia capabilities, you still could, as long as you had a mini USB cord, a PC, and a basic knowledge of moving around files. The only limit was your memory stick size. Yeah, another proprietary format. Sony loved doing that, and back then, I kind of liked it too. I thought it was so cool that I had this thing specifically for my PSP that also worked on other stuff too. PC towers back then with front IOs sometimes had a memory stick slot, like the ones at my middle school and our family PC at the time. So instead of a USB drive, I'd take a memory stick with the size converter to school and plug it into the computers there to download or transfer whatever files I needed. And kids would sometimes come by and say, "What's that?" And I'd say, "Oh, this is my PSP's memory card. But don't worry, it works for everything." I loved it back then, but man, I hate it now. Oh my god, dude. Thank god there are micro SD to memory stick converters now. I can't stand this format. Anyways, I digress. The PSP was surprisingly open, allowing you to copy over nearly anything to it, like MP3s, MP4s, JPEGs, and tons of other formats in between. I used to load all kinds of content onto my PSP to watch or listen to. The first MP3 that I ever torrented through LimeWire by myself without my brother's help was of Painted Black by the Rolling Stones, which I only liked because it was in Twisted Metal Black. And the first place that it went was right onto my PSP to listen to on loop. I'd also download my favorite videos off of YouTube from people like Ashens, The Irate Gamer, Armake21, and of course, AVGN. Then I would stuff them all onto my PSP so I'd have something to watch when I was at my dad's house, who at the time didn't have any Wi-Fi. I would rewatch those videos endlessly, and it would never fail to amaze me how I can do all of this on a game console several times smaller than our family's gateway PC. I would download tons of porn and hentai to look at when it was late, and so the PSP was, to the delight of many a hormonal boy, the perfect device for looking at material. And this was thanks to the PSP's dedicated web browser. Like many of the handheld's capabilities at the time, web browsing was pretty futuristic. Like, sure, you could do it on things like Blackberries and even some flip phones, but having it on a video game console was groundbreaking, especially a portable one. Nearly every website you could think of was accessible, with exceptions for complex sites like ones that used Flash. No Homestar Runner on PSP, unfortunately. So outside of YouTube and other Flash websites, I pretty much stopped browsing the web on my family's PC. I would spend hours looking at the latest gaming news on Kotaku, falling down multiple rabbit holes on Wikipedia, perusing the endless threads for the games I was playing at the time on GameFAQs, and of course, searching up material. The web browser was likely the most used feature on my PSP, more than any game I owned for it. And would it surprise you that the web browser wasn't even included with this thing at launch? It was actually introduced in the 2.0 firmware update, which dropped a few months later in 2005. Speaking of, we gotta talk about the updates. The PSP was, as far as I know, the first video game console to receive numerous firmware updates to both its system software as well as its games. If it wasn't the first, it was definitely the most consistent and convenient. When I learned about the concept of updates, I was hooked. I'd look forward to each system update to the point of making it into a ritual. Every time that I'd start up my PSP, I would scroll over to the update icon and select it, hoping that there was something new. Sometimes it'd say that you're on the latest firmware and you'd be sad, but those other times, oh man, you'd get the text saying what new firmware number it is, then you'd skip past all the terms and conditions and start to download the sucker. Most updates would be incremental, just some boring security stuff or whatever, but then you would get the big ones. Updates that would practically transform your PSP before your very eyes. They would add the web browser, of course, like I said, but then you would get other crazy things like PS3 Remote Play, freaking Skype, and tons of other little things that just enhance the experience. I remember that you couldn't change the colors of the background until an update came around. The only way that the color would change was with every month. It would reach a point where I would end up changing the month just to have a different background color. But with an update, you could change the colors to whatever you want, whenever you want. Not that that would even matter though, since in a later update, Sony would introduce themes to the console, which could change the background, the icons, and you could even make your own custom themes with the official PSP theme toolbox, which was easier said than done. I remember sitting there trying to figure out the program, and then I realized I don't know the first thing about graphic design, so I huffed, crossed my arms, then went back to go look at more hentai on my PSP. There were so many amazing things that were introduced to the PSP with firmware updates, but by far the most important update arguably had to be the 5.0 firmware in 2008, which introduced the PlayStation Store. Just like the PS3. Demos, themes, game news, even full games and DLC were available through the PSP's PlayStation Store, just like a modern console. Not only was the PSP promised to be like this thing, but now it's also just like this way more powerful thing. I'm probably hyping this up way more than it deserves. In fact, I think I only ever bought one thing through the store, and that was some DLC for a few games. I just can't comprehend how insane it is that this little handheld managed to reach almost feature parity with the console that came out a year later. How can you blame me for losing my mind when this thing was the competition? The system that has a hissy fit and turns itself off when you change the time? Well, at least the DS wasn't easier than an egg to crack. I deserve a goddamn medal for making it this far into a video about the PSP without mentioning the hacking scene. Everyone was hacking the PSP. Having a hacked PSP is the closest that humans can get to having superpowers. I remember when I decided to hack mine. It was one of the most exciting things ever, and also one of the scariest. I took to the PSP hacking forums and got all the info that I needed. And after a little sweat and elbow grease, I was able to whip up a Pandora's battery and a magic memory stick to boot. These were the keys that I needed to open up the Pandora's box of PSP hacking. From that point forward, everything would change forever. NES emulation, Super Nintendo emulation, an awful but impressive in hindsight Nintendo 64 emulator, cheat engines, game mods like the Manhunt 2 Uncensored patch, which I installed, of course, into an ISO I found off the internet. Tons and tons of ISOs, oh my goodness. I downloaded and played, or at least tried, so many freaking games. And this was before I knew anything about torrent sites, so I'd end up going to super sketchy websites. One that I always relied on was called WeISO.com or something like that. Then you'd have to download the game from like Mediafire or Mega Upload, and since those places had limits on file sizes, you would have to download multiple parts and then stitch them all together after the fact. If you wanted to deal with less parts to download or smaller game sizes, since memory stick storage was a premium back then, this cost $40 by the way, you could get the CISO versions of the games, the C meaning compressed. These would have tons of compromises. FMVs tended to be the first thing to go, either being heavily compressed or removed altogether, among other things. They sucked, but it was 2007. There wasn't much of a choice back then. Well, we could actually buy the games, but as a little kid, sometimes that wasn't an option. I was incredibly spoiled as a kid, but around the time that I finally hacked my PSP, my parents were spoiling me less and less with each passing year. I'd get some games to own, but I would mostly rely on rentals at the time. My parents likely thought that it was all I needed, which, in retrospect, they were probably right. But my greed was sickening. I wanted more, and I found a way. You could do so much with custom firmware, and Sony hated it. They and the hackers were always at odds with each other, rushing to outdo the other. Sony would put out an official firmware, then hackers would put out an exploit for that firmware, then Sony would end up putting out another official firmware, and so on and so on. A tale as old as time. Sitting here and writing this script, I had a bit of an epiphany about all of these updates. I think the reason that Sony went so hard with pushing out so many firmwares with cool new features was mostly as an effort to make people with hacked PSPs reconsider. For some people, it actually worked, including me. These features were so neat and novel, and at the time, not something easily replicated by homebrew, such as with Skype. Skype was the biggest chat platform at the time, and being able to use it to voice chat with your friends on your PSP really felt like you were doing the impossible. And depending on your model, it was the impossible. The original PSP, called the PSP 1000, lacked the necessary RAM size needed to run Skype. It was only usable starting with the PSP's next revision, the PSP 2000, also known as the PSP Slim. I never owned one of these, which is why I'm just holding a JPEG right here, but the biggest changes with the Slim are a better screen, TV output, more RAM for things like Skype, and a downgraded UMD hatch. That last one in particular was a huge disappointment for everyone, but as I understand, The original PSP's hatch was expensive to manufacture. Having a simple door you pull open was likely the smarter choice for Sony to save a few cents during production. I feel really bad that a lot of people that got PSPs likely didn't experience this hatch. Off topic, but I learned back then that you could actually shoot out UMDs on the PSP 1000. Just open the hatch while quickly tilting the console away from you and BAM! You got a firearm. Another thing that I didn't like about the slim models was that the front and the back of this console was all shiny. It felt slippery compared to the rougher texture of the 1000. Also, the 1000 had these curves in the back that made holding it feel much more natural compared to the 2000. Despite all of the downgrades and lackluster additions that came with the PSP, I still wanted it. Oh god, I really did. Sony ended up producing 3 more updates to the PSP. The 3000, which had an even better screen, built-in microphone, and it changed the home button to a PlayStation button. Much more incremental compared to the jump between the 1000 and 2000. Then came the PSP Street, which was positioned as a budget model, and man, was it ever. No Wi-Fi, only one speaker, and the UMD hatch was even weirder. The whole back just opens up now. That is terrifying. And lastly, we have the antithesis of the PSP Street, the PSP Go. This was positioned not as an upgrade, but as another PSP to coexist along with the 3000. The form factor is completely different now, looking more like the sliding phones at the time. The size is absurdly small and makes the PSP Slim look large in comparison. It's probably around as thick as 3 or even 4 UMDs stacked together. And you're probably wondering about where a UMD would go on the PSP Go. I'll give you a hint. Physical media was no more on the go. This console was Sony's experiment to see if digital games would be a viable future, at least for portable consoles, and it was an experiment that failed tremendously. There's a multitude of reasons for why the PSP Go didn't work out. First, it came out in late 2009. The world now in 2026 isn't ready for digital-only gaming. Can you imagine how foreign of a concept that must have been back then? And even if you were down with going digital-only, you would eventually have to deal with the concerns of space and Sony's penchant for expensive proprietary storage solutions, and the Go had one to call its own. A new version of the memory stick called the Micro was much smaller and, surprise, surprise, expensiver. The console did have 16 gigs of internal storage from the get-go, but since PSP games tended to be pretty large, you were going to fill that up rather quickly. Doubly so if you plan to treat your PSP like a multimedia device like I did. Lastly, the Go was expensive. $250. With that money, you could get a pre-owned PSP 1000, a pre-owned game, and a bottle of bourbon to distract you from the digital apocalypse that the Go was sounding the trumpets for. Digital gaming can be convenient, but when it's more expensive than a cheaper model that lets you use both physical and digital, the justification of convenience goes right out the window. And this is coming from someone that actually prefers digital gaming, by the way. Having options is always great, whether you use them or not. At least there were some benefits to the PSP Go compared to the modern digital-only consoles, but man, we are just not ready for this. Thankfully, one of those small benefits that the PSP Go had was that, despite its smaller form factor, it was still compatible with some accessories from the other models. And there were tons of them for the PSP. There was a microphone, a GPS, a TV tuner, and of course, the crown jewel of them all, the camera. There were 2 types of cameras for the PSP. The first model looked like my garbage aftermarket faceplate, and a second model that was objectively worse compared to the former. Guess which one I got? This model in particular was packed in with a game called Choto-Shot, released only in Japan, meaning that I had to get this whole thing imported. Probably the first thing that I ever imported from another country. Choto-Shot at its core is a fun photography suite that kind of replicates those cute little photo booths that they have in Japan, now in the palm of your hands. I personally didn't care much for the game, especially since it was in Japanese and I was like 11 or something. I just wanted it so that I could use it with the camera option that was available in the XMB, and used it I did. The PSP was my digital camera for a good 4 years or so, and what a wonderful decision. Along with the cool camera stuff, you could do all kinds of other miscellaneous things with the PSP. You could play PlayStation 1 games that were on the PlayStation Store, which I did for tons of games from my childhood, like Mega Man 8 and Mega Man Legends. Through PS3 Remote Play, you could play a few select games on your PSP. It wasn't the best way to play them, but you could play them. There was an RSS feed that was introduced in an update, so you could listen to podcasts or get news articles if that was your thing. There was even a dedicated comic book viewer. There was Location Free Player, and I don't even know what Location Free Player is, but it's on there, and that makes it cool on its own. Dude, there was just so much in the PSP, dude. A lot of the things that I listed was likely not used by most owners of the console, like Location Free Player, but its presence on the XMB made it feel so important. All this potential in one little device. I felt powerful holding the PSP in my hands. You're probably wondering when the title of this video was going to come into play, and here's the secret. It's always been in play. All these little things, big and small, are what make the PSP special and impossible to replicate. The PSP had a successor, the PlayStation Vita. It had almost every single feature that the PSP had, on top of so many other features. Don't get me wrong, I love my Vita. I have so many wonderful, happy memories with the thing, but it was unfortunately a victim of circumstance. The PS Vita had to fight not just the 3DS, but the hundreds of thousands of smartphones that were in people's pockets back then, including mine. Exclusive games and raw power were on the Vita's side, but multimedia was something that phones and even its predecessors did better and conveniently. That alone cut out like more than half of my potential usage with the system. I just had other places to get my entertainment from now. The Vita wasn't special. And now we live in this day and age where the standard is powerful handheld consoles, phones, tablets, and other similar devices. But none of them are special. But the PSP was. This device from 2005, where the only real blueprint we had for portable gaming was the Game Boy Advance and maybe the DS. Some of the features were janky, but considering that this was the first time it was attempted on a mainstream portable, it's forgivable. The web browser not being able to access some sites, the low resolution screen with its nasty ghosting was terrible for games and movies, the memory sticks. There were so many bad or underwhelming things about the PSP, but I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I think that made it all the more charming. I didn't know it at the time, but all these little issues and eccentricities were what was gonna stick in my mind and define my memories of the console. Again, it helps that it was probably the first to do it. It was something special that can't be replicated. There will never be another PSP. And that's okay, because everything it attempted back then, like I said, is the standard now. Me making this video doesn't mean I'm gonna dedicate my entire life to playing and glazing the damn thing every chance I get, but it's nice to be able to slow down and reminisce on a time when technology was still this exciting new frontier, where every year just felt like this bag of developments and advancements that no one could ever expect. And that is what the PSP represents perfectly, that era. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great and wonderful rest of your day.